Greetings, fellow conspirators. It is I, LG Grande. You know, the new number 6. It's good to have you here on this preview, a test of American and world technocracy, and perhaps a signal call to fellow conspirators. You and I may already know each other thanks to my work on Liberty Conspiracy Radio or the podcast, maybe my fiction or my new work for MRC TV, and that would be work that Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees recently showed to have been put on a Google blacklist. So, as the state and its connected predators ramp up the pressure, it's time to push back. Let me show you what we're up against in this, the first of what could be a continuing line of Liberty Conspiracy output with your help. I think there's no better time than now as the COVID-19 crackdowns expose the thirst of politicians for their intense desire to gain power and the blindness that they and many Americans display towards things like natural rights, voluntary association, and free will. And so I think it's a good opportunity to reconvene the conspiracy and draw out of these breaking controversial stories some deep fundamental flaws and lessons. Intellectual ammunition, you might call it. Ammunition that shows us that even perfectly appropriate umbrage about government crackdowns of businesses and in parks and even in people's homes only actually float on the surface of a much larger, deeper sea. And of course, I think once we start to search the depths of that sea, we recognize that this is a great opportunity to learn about the roots of peace, privacy, free will, voluntary economic exchange, and the better and more fruitful lives that grow from it. So, let's get started. As I plan on producing, at first, two kinds of programs. The first one will be daily, or almost daily, if I can swing it, Liberty Conspiracy case files. And they will be speedily produced overviews of many breaking stories looming like Cthulhu over the metaphorical landscape of liberty. The second will be the weekly Liberty Conspiracy case study, where we review some of these stories or focus on one story and then expand on that, deriving the big lesson about freedom that will stand regardless of time or place. And in some cases, when I do the daily updates, we'll also draw out of it a larger lesson. And I have many other plans for other kinds of videos that will connect with the larger scope of liberty and the network of pro-freedom, real freedom people who are out there. So let's get started right now with a couple pertinent quotes. Okay, we start with one of the greatest figures of the American Revolution, one of the key men behind the Sons of Liberty out of Boston, Samuel Adams. Among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. And thirdly, to property. Very key to remember in this instance, together with the right to defend them in the best manner they can. All of those are all mixed in as we look at the COVID crackdowns. Then we have Frederick Bastiat, the great philosopher from the 19th century in France, great economist as well, this being from his awesome treatise, The Law. Government is the great fiction through which everybody endeavors to live at the expense of everybody else. I believe in the original it is government is that great fiction by which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else. But I could be mistaken. And I think we understand what he means. So let's look at some of the greatest hits of COVID Crackdown 2020. And for the opening of this, I'm going to refer to some of the articles that I've been writing recently for MRC TV, and then I will sort of expand on that, indeed. So let's look first at the wonderful New Jersey Governor Murphy in his conversation about the second week of April with none other than Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who asked Governor Murphy if he thought about the Bill of Rights, because of course this man swears an oath to protect and defend the United States Constitution. And Governor Murphy's response was, I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights, when he engaged in shutting down businesses, calling some essential and some non-essential, and telling people they had to stay in their homes. He said it was above his pay grade. Thank you, Governor Murphy. Well, since that is supposed to be about what your job is about, and it's not really a job because no one voluntarily pays you in any way whatsoever, I think perhaps you might want to review, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, and the 14th Amendment, because, of course, you have completely destroyed the right of people to freely and voluntarily assemble. You shut down businesses and punish people without any trial. You've basically created house arrest. You've taken property without any form of compensation whatsoever. And you have unequally applied the laws, picking some people as favorites and others as non-favorites. Okay, but that's just the start to some of this wonderful stuff that we've seen. So I will refer you to a few other great passages. This one, California County COVID cops could arrest church singers who live stream worship because, of course, those people aren't social distancing and they're getting together to worship something above the God of the government, the God of the state. And we can't have that now, can we? Even though, of course, the police are massive hypocrites here. They're walking around oftentimes infected, and in order to arrest people, they have to break that wonderful 6-foot barrier. Then we have Kentucky Church sues governor over COVID-19 shutdown. This has happened in more than one church, where the police have arrived even to bust people for being in their cars on Easter Sunday. Great. Then the terrific Representative Omar, she had a bill in Washington, D.C. pop up recently that would see the federal government seize rental properties if landlords tried to collect rent during the virus emergency. Yes, during the crisis, as Rahm Emanuel and Hillary Clinton said, never squander a good crisis. And as Robert Higgs has said in Leviathan, Crisis and Leviathan, there's always that ratcheting effect. They take advantage of the crisis that they often create in government. They build new institutions that then become permanent in government and never ratchet down. Then we have Governor Whitmer. Yeah, nothing like Governor Whitmer. Oh, by the way, we can talk about the economic problems that this creates when the government is threatening people that they can't raise their rents. I think we know what's going to happen to supply in that case, don't we? Anybody who has a concept about economics? Obviously, she does not. Then we have Governor Whitmer. Oh, she's a classic one. She's going to appear again in a little bit. Governor Whitmer flips from virus people tracking contract handed to Dem Political Intel Group. This is a little while ago. There was a very cozy relationship between her and the corporation that she was going to pick to track people. Nothing like that Fourth Amendment, huh? Turns out that what got people upset was not the breach of the Fourth Amendment. It was the fact that this company was connected with the Democrat Party and had contracts to do PR for some candidates. Then we have this wonderful one out of Winslow, Arizona. Arizona COVID cops. We don't want you to feel like we're harassing you, as they harass and shut down the mom and pop store. So let's see how these wonderful agents of the state wearing blue costumes came into this man's store like a mafia and acted like a mafia, essentially giving him the line, gee, nice place you got here. I'd hate for something to happen to it.
Hi, man. How are you?
How are you doing?
Good.
We open today.
Absolutely.
Okay. I believe you have already been given a warning about being open, not being open.
Okay, so this man who is not pulling people into his place, not kidnapping anybody, not forcing anybody to come into his place, he's just opened his private property to people. If they want to come into his authentic Indian store, they can come in and they can freely engage in voluntary transactions with him. Instead, agents of the state who already are paid through coercive taxation that he has to pay in the first place, everything they wear, everything they drive, and their food on the table is brought to them by the coercive actions of the state and the threats of them going to arrest him if he already doesn't pay them taxes. Now they come in to strong arm him a little bit more. They walk in and, oh, gee, you open here? I mean, just absolutely insufferable, just disgusting. And say, oh, haven't you already been warned? And this man, who owns this authentic Indian shop, says, oh, very nervously, oh, no, wait, everything's okay. And he goes and grabs a sheet of paper.
I'm in compliance, sir.
How are you in compliance?
I'm in compliance. This is the United States. I'm in compliance. We'll see how that reference to private property earlier has a bearing here. And in the next couple seconds, we'll see why that's so important.
I changed my license.
I changed my license. That's the key. He had to be licensed by the state. He had to get a permit in order to engage in peaceful, voluntary interactions with people to trade items for money. He had to get permission from the agents of the state who don't ask his permission to get the money that they want from him. There's an imbalance here. The state is that agency which claims a statutory monopoly on the use of aggressive violence. They excuse themselves. And this man has tried to comply. How did he try to comply? Well, originally his place was an antique and gift store. Then he had to go through the process of getting it relabeled as a department store, and he had to change his calculations about what he was going to bring into the store. And if you ask anybody who owns a store, they only have a certain amount of floor space. So they have to decide what they're going to try to sell. This man had to change it, not based on his calculations and what the customers might like. Now the customers are being screwed out of their own decisions as well. Their own preferences are not being reflected by his choices to try to cater to them. No, the third party, the state, with these blue costume representatives, these agents, these thugs, come in and tell him, this is what you're going to carry. That's called fascism. And we'll get into that a little bit more.
I'm not just a souvenir store now.
Okay.
I am a department store. Indian department store.
Unbelievable. And he had to add things.
I am
So you
handling
changed your
hay.
name?
I am handling hay. I am handling paper towels, food, dog food. I'm starting. I'm getting a bunch of new stuff. We're kind of.
But he wasn't doing things to their satisfaction. They didn't like what he had brought in. They handcuffed him and threw him in the back of a cruiser. Classic. Then we have this. Out of Washington State, Brittany Hughes, who is, of course, with MRC TV. You might have seen some of her videos. Restaurants in Washington State must keep a log of all customers to facilitate any contact tracing in order to reopen. Isn't that great? Nothing like the Fourth Amendment. No problem. All you customers, you're going to be traced. And again, the licensing requirement here. The way the state gets these people to comply is because people already have accepted the notion of licensing. They've already acquiesced to the government coercion that they get permission to engage in peaceful interaction with other people. That is the point at which everything is blown out. You lose at that point. Then we've got this one. Out of Fresno. Oh yeah, out of Fresno. Fresno, California, social distancing health enforcers turned away by customers in restaurant line, so cops cuff one man. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail either in this video or the next video as we start to expand on this idea. But just to let you know, again, this is licensing. This is a place called the Waffle Shop that was open last Sunday on Mother's Day, contrary to orders from the government. And as you can see, according to the New York Daily News, a California police chief is pleading for respect after an angry crowd clashed with one of his officers at a waffle shop restaurant that opened in defiance of a coronavirus stay-at-home order. Well, considering the fact that they don't have the power to order anybody, and even if the statutes or the Constitution said they could, they still wouldn't have the power to do so. It doesn't matter what a government document says, even if it's the U.S. Constitution. We're talking human beings, human on human ethics here. And if an individual doesn't have any ethical prerogative to be able to prevent other people from peacefully engaging one another, then two people don't have it, and three people don't have it, and no matter how many more you multiply behind the coercive agency, they still are coercive. And it is immoral and unethical. That's the point, unethical. We'll go into that a little bit more, and we'll talk about this and why it's not just that people get upset about this. There's more to it than that. Then we have wonderful Hamilton, Ontario, where back in April they had physical distancing fines that they were handing out to homeless people. And of course, just recently we got to see this wonderful one as police went inside a man and woman's home in Hamilton, Ontario, and they went to take him away because he was not complying with the COVID-19 crackdowns and social distancing. He was protesting the government.
This your corrupted government.
He says, "You are part of this corrupted government," says the man, as the cops have come into his house.
Part of that big system.
Okay.
You come in here like this.
Mhm.
Are we so dangerous to you? Look at us.
I hope not. I hope everything goes smoothly.
What?
I don't know.
I hope everything goes smoothly. The guy doesn't even get it. They are there to threaten this man with aggressive armed force. The man and his wife are in their house. They come in the house, into the private property, just like the store owner. And by the way, we'll look at the 1946 Supreme Court decision called Marsh v. Alabama, which redefined private property of businesses as public property when it is not public property. And now governments don't even respect private homes at all either. So the whole concept of private property is utterly destroyed. But let's continue here.
My job, I have to make sure that I protect myself and protect everyone that I'm dealing with. Right?
I have to make sure I protect myself and protect everyone else I'm dealing with as he goes into this guy's house. Unbelievable Orwellian newspeak.
That's the purpose.
Wait a second. Yesterday, a bunch of your colleagues came, and also on a like almost SWAT team. You should bring tanks next time.
Come around. Yeah. Yeah, you can let them know that. Yep.
You know, and
My boss is here as well, just so you know, he was out.
why is this charade? Why this guns? Why this? You like gangsters?
Yeah, this is my uniform. This is what they gave me to wear every day.
Yesterday they told us, oh, we're gonna check on you again.
Yeah.
I'm like, come like this. Come at least like this, like her.
Yeah.
What is without
She's
him?
not a police
Sir, just to
officer.
let you know, I'm a mental health worker with St. Joseph's Hospital. We are part of a specialized unit, the Rapid Response Unit with Hamilton
What
Police.
is-
And so they took him away. Isn't that great? To a psych ward. Then we've got this one. Thank goodness some people are standing up. Barber says he isn't shutting down after the state suspends his license. Very cool, out of Michigan. This guy is 77 years old. Carl Mankey, supported by lots of people, and he is open for business. Good for him. You probably saw stories about him. And as the Wisconsin Supreme Court strikes down the Wisconsin government's so-called stay-at-home order, the bars are opening. It would be great if they had defied it and opened before that. Then we have this. This out of Chicago, Illinois. This from the mayor of Chicago. Again, there are two things to discuss here, and one of them is not being discussed very much. This one is in the news today because the mayor of Chicago wants her employees to pledge allegiance to the New World Order. Now, just to preface this, I'm not interested in any form of the state. And the larger the state is, the worse it is. The more people it can hurt with its decisions, the less addressable it is, and the less it knows about problems on the local level. So the larger it becomes, the more dangerous and deadly it is. In addition to, so I'm not in favor of any sort of world government. Nationalism, if you're going to go with a state, at least nationalism is a little bit closer to the cultural differentiation and so on, but that leads to some problems down the line as well. But at least people can separate, and if they don't like something, they can flee. So if you've got something like the United States, and the states really are differentiated from one another, if people are dissatisfied in one state, they can go to another state. Okay. But the mayor of Chicago doesn't seem to be interested in that. And she wants her employees to pledge to the New World Order. Something that people are not noticing, however, is what she said just before that about those types of employees and how important they are.
Training, particularly in the city, I'll call them licensing departments, whether it's zoning, buildings, housing will be impacted by it, planning certainly, and you pick the people to run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance. And then I think you have...
Okay, now I'll pause that there. I want to give a heads up to Shotguns and Roses podcast, and also want to go back a little bit to T-Bird Lauderdale. Great stuff from T-Bird Lauderdale. Thank you. But just to go back to her, this is interesting because the mayor of Chicago literally said that, okay? But a lot of people aren't discussing the licensing part, the zoning part, all those coercive activities in which the government engages beforehand. Yes, the NWO thing is very inflammatory, but the other stuff is also extremely dangerous, and they lie at the root that many people don't question. And those things need to be questioned because they are what are leading to all these problems in restaurants where governments are shutting people down. Licensing, that's the key. Any sort of government demand that you must acquiesce to them. And yet, at the same time, we have the AP claiming that she did not say that she supports the New World Order. They actually say, oh, our assessment it was false and the video was edited to take her words out of context. No, sorry. You heard it right there. You heard her say it. It wasn't edited. She said it. The AP, you're a laughingstock. And by the way, if you go to Facebook, when I went to post that video, Facebook uses the AP in part, along with other people who are hardcore leftists, as their so-called fact checkers. And guess what they did? Yeah, they claimed that this was false and put their little screen up because they agree with the AP. Unbelievable. They're making themselves jokes. Well, they're already jokes. Isn't that amazing? Then we've got this one. Gretchen Whitmer. State police are monitoring all of the conversations of Capitol protesters. Oh, that's great. And what are the Capitol protesters doing? Well, they're doing sort of like what happened in Chicago back on May 2nd. They went out and protested the mayor of Chicago. And many people made signs, which obviously skewered the mayor for acting like a fascist Nazi, otherwise known as a National Socialist. A hardcore, you will do as I say, I will pick and choose the businesses that can operate and can't operate, and I will lock people in their homes. I will allow you to work if I want to. And they were depicted by people like Randy Rhoads, who clearly didn't get their sarcasm, as being somehow pro-Nazi. Yeah, by the way, this sign in Chicago during one of the protests as they called them, the Illinois Nazis, which is a line from the Blues Brothers, appeared in front of one of the concentration camps. And if you'd like the translation, Ms. Rhodes, it stands for work sets you free. They were being sarcastic, ironic. Now let's just go back very quickly to a couple other stories. Laredo police arrest 2 for offering beauty treatments out of their homes. That's not fascist in any way whatsoever. Oh yeah, then there's the Democrat governors insult the very people they've made unemployed. As Governor Cuomo said, hey, you want to go to work? Get a job as an essential worker. Get a job as an essential worker, and then you won't kill anybody. Which, of course, assumes that essential workers are somehow prone to not being infected, and assumes that he can pick and choose the types of jobs that you can do. We've got this economic report. I'll talk about that one later. Then the Atlantic. They claim that Chinese totalitarian net control is largely right and that it creates a flourishing internet. What are they talking about? That's completely insane. Now, let's go over to the first page and we'll wrap this up for you. And thanks so much for being part of this, everybody. This is a really fun time to start everything off. Okay, a few more stories very quickly. New York City de Blasio, the mayor, targets those who weren't social distancing after he himself joined 100 out in front of a hospital for a photo op. And that included the wonderful taped X on the sidewalk for the exact best spot for him and his wife to plunk their feet. Then we have Americans defying the shutdowns. That's very cool. Protesters going up against Governor Newsom in California. Texas judge tells salon owner to apologize for opening her business. We saw what happened there, where the Texas governor finally acted, but he could have done a lot more. And she had a lot of people standing, helping her out. That was awesome. With COVID crackdowns, Seattle to permanently shut 20 miles of streets for the health of taxpayers. And you can go to the MRC TV YouTube page for that channel. And then we have the San Antonio City Council proclaiming the use of terms Wuhan coronavirus and Chinese virus and Kung flu are hate speech. That's just a resolution, but it shows you how ignorant they are. You can watch that video over at the MRC TV channel as well. There's the Fresno social distancing story. And then there's this one. Colorado government attacks restaurant that opened in defiance of state diktats. I want to go to this very briefly and sort of round things off. So, as you can see here, after warning the restaurant on Friday not to open and reminding them they are only allowed to do takeout and delivery, the restaurant was open to dine-in eating on May 10th, the health department stated. Okay. So this is some of what the police had to say. And as I put it here, what's most important, and this is the important point about private property and free will that must be stressed during this COVID crackdown and forevermore. Private property allows people to make choices about themselves based on their own risk assessment. And no person B has to worry about person A's choice unless B decides to voluntarily associate with him or her. The public, government-run areas are where people rightfully conflict because all taxpayers have valid claims over how it is run. That leads to less choice and often immoral, one-size-fits-all mandates that screw up the economy. And I'll go back to this and read to you a little something that I think is worthwhile as we get ready to close. If a despot of another time first established edicts and prohibitions that shut businesses, restricted movement on streets led to arbitrary choices of which businesses were acceptable and unacceptable, led to arbitrary arrests and fines, closures of churches and funerals, saw government-connected communication services censor unapproved speech, and then that despot followed these edicts with more murderous commands. It is 100% appropriate to cite the rhetoric and early actions of such a despot when contemporary politicians act in similar ways. Folks in Illinois were pointing out that the government happens to be following in the footsteps of Hitler, and that might appear to be inappropriate to some, but the comparisons are apt. And if people in New York want to do the same to the mayor there, they are more than justified, regardless of the ignorant screeching of those who might see such criticism as uncouth. They are justified anywhere. And by the way, those people who are screeching the loudest are often the same people who called Donald Trump a Nazi. And of course, this is no defense of Trump. He's not only forsaken his oath to the Constitution. For those of us who tread in deeper pro-liberty waters, the Constitution not only doesn't defend or act as a protector for individual rights and free will, it actually allows attacks and represents an assumption of government power that stands in complete contravention to real liberty. But at least those politicians like Trump could abide by their oaths and defend the Bill of Rights. That would be terrific. Hey, thanks so much for joining me, everybody. Just want to round things off by mentioning a little something here. And that is, I talked in one of my videos, and many other people have discussed this, about how right now and probably in the future, no politician can actually know the deadliness of this pathogen. Well, as the pop media prattle on about an invisible enemy, the threat of which is impossible to pin down because CDC infection numbers have been undercounted and the CARES Act appears to incentivize medical centers to overcount COVID-19 cases, it's good to... And of course, the deadliness of the pathogen is actually irrelevant and shouldn't be used as any sort of justification for increasing the power of government over free will and private property. And likewise, the opposite of this is true. The fact that the pathogen might not be as deadly as first assumed does not represent the reason one should turn away from government and rely on freedom. In fact, the deadlier the pathogen could be, the more obvious it should be that one should shun government and public property and rely on private property, where people can exclude of their own free will. And no one is forcing anybody to do anything. We'll talk more about that next time. For now, thank you very much for joining me on this, the first of the Liberty Conspiracy videos, and I hope you'll come back for many more. And please tell your friends. Just the name Liberty Conspiracy on you-know-what tube could get it suppressed, but I'm doing it anyway. We'll talk more. Feel free to contact me. You'll see my Twitter information in just a minute. For now, I'm LG Grande, Guard Goldsmith. Be seeing you.